Welcome to Issues and Answers with your host, Diane Kinderwater. Issues and Answers is presented as a public service to inform, educate, and better the lives of New Mexicans. And now, Issues and Answers with your host, Diane Kinderwater.
Welcome to the program. I'm Diane Kinderwater. Cannabis, marijuana, dope, weed, a lot of different names, but one thing they all have in common is that they are now legal in New Mexico. Consumption of cannabis, marijuana, weed, etc., has been legal for almost a year, going on a year this July 1st. And the sale has just begun legally in the state of New Mexico. On the program today, we're going to talk to one of the sponsors of the main legalization of cannabis on the program, State Senator Gerald Ortiz Pino, to kind of give us an update on what is going on in the world of cannabis, the world of marijuana, with the consumption now being legal and now the sale being legal. What does all this mean to you and me? We'll be back with State Senator Gerald Ortiz Pino right after this. Please stay with us.
The National Education Association of New Mexico, a union of teachers and school staff, believes every child deserves to learn at a school that inspires their imagination, cultivates their curiosity, and ensures a fulfilling life. Public schools should provide all our students with small class sizes and one-on-one attention. NEA New Mexico asks you to join us so together we can end the teacher and staff shortage and invest in our public education system once and for all. Sponsored by NEA New Mexico.
Welcome back to the program. State Senator Gerald Ortiz Pino, for decades, it seems, you worked to legalize the consumption on a recreational basis for cannabis, marijuana. Medical marijuana has been legal for years. Now the sale of recreational marijuana has taken place in our state. Just give me a little bit of history on your dedication, your desire to see this legal in our state, and the sale of it legal. Why did you have such a passion for legalizing cannabis recreationally?
Yeah. Well, I think it started when I realized that despite the fact that it was illegal, almost everybody that I knew was using it, and a lot of them used it with impunity. They had no fear that the police would bust them or whatever. They were well-to-do. They were able to buy it from a source that they trusted. They were at no danger whatsoever of running afoul of the law. They used it in their own home after hours as a way to relax. But that on the street, kids were getting busted, put in jail, losing scholarships, losing jobs, having to, drop out of relationships that they had hoped that would lead to a marriage or something, because they suddenly had a criminal label put on them for something that was universally understood not to be that dangerous. And so I thought, if they're going to be using it anyhow, what's the point of it being illegal? Well, it was kind of like under abolition, when we made liquor illegal in the country. Some people got very rich. Anybody willing to break the law to smuggle it in or to manufacture it or to set up a distribution system got very rich because we had made it illegal. And so I think that was the when I started thinking, how do we deal with something more reasonably than when we have a law on the books that can really come down like a hammer on some people, not at all on other people, lead to the jails being full of young people who basically were doing something that didn't hurt anyone. So that's when we started the whole thing. And we started with medical because it was clear that this is a traditional medicine in indigenous cultures, in Hispanic culture, in a lot of mountain cultures, in Appalachia. The use of marijuana was long established. It was a way to increase appetite, to help people sleep better, to deal with indigestion. A lot of families here still have memories of their grandparents who would have a little jar of alcohol with some marijuana leaves and stems that they had put in there, and then they would use that as a liniment for aches and pains, to ease aches and pains. So that it was an herbal medicine was pretty clear. So we could use it in that situation. We started with medical marijuana because it seemed to be something that would be accepted, and it really took it out of the realm of people just getting high and doing crazy things. Now, other states had gone ahead. We have, I think, 20 other states now besides New Mexico also permit marijuana for recreational purposes. And so that was then the impetus behind getting it going. How do we take the profit for the criminals out of it and use that profit for state purposes? How do we tax it, in other words? How do we regulate it? How do we license it? How do we treat it more like alcohol, which is what people, young people who use it view it more as a substitute for alcohol than of anything.
Those who use it recreationally,
yeah,
compared to the holistic herbal.
To the medicine people.
To the medicine people. So it was, I think, July 1st of 2021. It's been legal in the state to consume it, but not to buy it. I mean, not to sell it, I should say. I don't know how
not
they
to sell it. Yeah,
not to sell it, but now we are in the realm of actually selling it. So that's what we're going to be doing an update. But since it became legal, what has happened with, of course, we haven't been able to tax it because we're not selling it, but other than working on all the regulations to make the growers know what the laws that they need to abide by, the water rights and all that's been going on in the state.
Yeah.
But regarding the legalization of recreational cannabis, recreational marijuana, Senator Ortiz Pino, for the past 8 months or so, any changes, anything you've heard going on in the state? Visitors coming in?
Well, no visitors coming in yet because, I mean, well,
you can't buy it. You can't buy it. But what's changed?
But that is the anticipation that particularly in those areas near the Arizona and Texas borders, there will be attraction of people from.
But in the past, since it's been legalized, just a sigh of relief from people who are using it, or what's
I think
been
so.
going on?
I mean, hopefully, what it's done is reduce the police time devoted to to busting kids smoking a joint in the park. I noticed a couple kids walking down the street the other day. Now, juveniles still aren't allowed to. So when I say kids, I'm talking about people that look a lot younger than me. I have no idea how old they actually
we
were.
always think they're kids, right?
That's right.
And they're 40 years old. They're 40 years old.
Yeah, could have been. They were playing a boombox with the rap music, so I didn't think they were that old. But they were smoking a joint and passing it back and forth. So in the old days, they might have gotten busted for that. They won't now. Unless they're underage. If they're under.
But you in the legislature, you as a senator, what have you heard about since the legalization of recreational?
I haven't heard of any real change in the way. I mean, the sun still rises in the east and sets in the west. Everything seems to be moving ahead. What has changed is enormous activity in preparation for the sale.
Okay.
Because there are lots and lots of real estate deals that have been, conducted. Storefronts that have been renovated into dispensaries, properties that have been purchased and now are being set up with irrigation systems, or greenhouses being constructed. There's a lot of economic activity. People are being hired. There's a huge demand for skilled labor, people who know how to grow.
Okay,
having lots of opportunities.
But we can grow it now, we just can't sell it. So that growing has been going on.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, let's start with the basic lowest common denominator is the person in their own home. I understand they can grow up to
I think 12?
6 or 12
I think it's
mature
up to 12.
plants in a house, or I think 6 mature plants per person, maybe 2 per household. I mean, 12 per household if there's 2 adults, and they have to be over 21. So right now people can grow it in their own homes.
Yes, that's true.
That's the person.
And who knows how much of that's going on? Because people aren't going to necessarily grow it outdoors where it could be stolen by some neighborhood kid. But I think whatever's consumption is going on now is probably through the same illegal sources that was going on before. But that now there also is going to be legal sources, and hopefully the legal will be able to squelch the illegal sources. That's the balancing act.
The balance, or they're growing it themselves if they have
Or they
seeds.
may be growing it themselves.
So we can start with 6 plants per person, 12 per household if you want to grow it yourself legally, and people can possess up to 2 ounces of cannabis, 16 grams of concentrate. Okay. Now the sale and the growing side, continue with the growing side. I understand the micro grower can grow up to 100 plants, and I think in the session you wanted to increase that to 200, but it's still capped at 100.
And it failed. Yeah, that bill failed, which is unfortunate because, what we're trying to figure out is supply demand. You don't want, as some states experienced, so much of a supply that the bottom drops out of the market. It's available everywhere. You can't make a profit at it, and businesses go out of business. They just go bankrupt because they can't survive in that kind of oversupply market. And you don't want so much demand that the illegal market still thrives, that your supply isn't sufficient to to provide for all the demand that there exists out there. And so that balancing act is what the state licensing and regulation department, which is in charge of this, has been trying to figure out. Now you've got some people who have these medical marijuana. There are 32 medical marijuana license providers in the state who really had a head start. They've had, in some cases, a 7 or 8 year head start. Certainly, they were licensed back in September. They were all grandfathered in. They've been gearing up. They've been expanding production. They've been adding greenhouses, buying up property to grow it, buying up water rights. So they will have ample supplies of water, and they'll have a huge head start. What do we call them? The micro enterprises. Micro enterprises are the ones that can grow up to 100 plants. The idea had been, well, let's increase theirs so 200, so they at least have a fighting chance of survival.
Because I think the large producers can produce 4,500.
They raised it. See, those weren't listed in the law, and so the state licensing and regulation, by regulation, raised it to 10,000 plants. They can raise up to 10,000 at a time. Now, keep in mind, if you're growing indoors, you probably can get 4 cycles a year. So they'll be producing enormous quantities. Meanwhile, the microprocessors, we put into the law the 100 plant limit.
Oh, but we didn't put into law the other.
No, that was to be set by the department.
And that was, by researching this, I understood the micro was supposed to be like a microbrewery or a small vineyard, 100.
That's right.
To equate with them, and of course our little microbreweries have taken off in our state.
Yeah.
But now the other large producers who is concerned they might be out-of-state folks coming in who have experience
I've heard
in other
rumors.
states.
I've heard rumors that some of those 35 medical licensees have already sold at enormous profit. They've been doing it for 8 or 10 years. They were able to sell it for several $1 million to an out-of-state company that now will run it, hiring local people, but basically the profits won't be kept here. They'll be regionalized, let's say. That's one of the fears I had. That was one of the hopes that we were trying to avoid. Yeah.
But the legislature limited the micro to 100, but kind of failed to limit
we didn't pass that bill, and that's something that we've got to address, so that we take it out. I think we should just give that to the regulation and licensing department too. You set the limit for the micro enterprise.
Well, they set the limit of 100,000 to the large producers.
Yeah.
Why did they do that? Why did they make that so big?
Because they were concerned there wouldn't be enough supply, and so that the black market would still thrive.
Oh, okay.
And they were persuaded by some, very vocal. Mr. Rodriguez from Ultra Health is very vocal in his belief that we are squelching the free enterprise system by setting any limits at all. There should be no limits, he said. So they keep trying to, I think, find some fine balance between what he wants, which is no limits, and what we had initially said, which was 4,500 plants.
So starting, of course, and along with that is the water rights. And I know there was discussion this past session, why do we have to have water rights for cannabis, marijuana plants, whereas if we want to grow corn, we don't have to prove those rights?
I know, that's what, and I tend to agree with that. I think that the hullabaloo raised over acequia rights being somehow infringed by this, I could never understand that, because if you're on an acequia, you don't have unlimited access to the water. You have whatever we're on an acequia in Dixon, and as a parciante of the acequia del Llano in Dixon, we can't irrigate our field all we want every day. It's 3 hours on every other Wednesday morning, or whatever is meted out to us by the acequia. The acequia retains control of its own water. So this thought that somehow somebody on the acequia would drill a well and I never could understand the fear there, because it seems to me that if you can grow alfalfa or corn or timothy or any of the other crops that people use in these irrigated fields in New Mexico, we're not growing, truck crops of carrots and squash and things going up. It's mostly just those few forage crops that are being grown by the acequia parciantes, or their own gardens for their own consumption. You don't have to have separate water rights for that. You have rights on the acequia. If you own those, you keep those. So I never could understand that hullabaloo over it. But that all we should have said is that you have to be able to guarantee that you will not be infringing on anybody else's water rights. And then leave it up to regulation and licensing. They put it in the state engineer's office, and in the law we put it into the state engineer's office. And what people are running into is the state engineer doesn't really regulate. I mean, if you have your own home and you own your own property, you can drill a well. You can't necessarily use it for commercial purposes, but you can grow whatever your land will absorb with your own well. Well, somebody who owns a property in Santa Rosa came to me and said, the state engineer hasn't allowed me to transfer I own these water rights. I just want to be able to manufacture the cannabis as well, and I need some water to do that. Not a lot, but some. And he won't approve the thing. So I called the state engineer, and he said, well, we're backlogged. We have so many requests. We don't have the people. It'll take a year. Well, this guy's got $1 million tied up in his invested in his production, and until he can get that from the state engineer. These are some of the real glitches we've created with this.
With regulations.
By trying to be too careful. Yeah.
Maybe that's sometimes the idea that government gets in the way just sometimes of free enterprise, of letting things just grow and bloom. But that's just an example. Wow, so it's a whole new industry. We're going to see storefronts opening, selling. We call them what, dispensers?
Dispensaries, yeah.
Why that? Why not? Why?
I don't know. That was the language that got used in the. That's what we did with medical cannabis, and so they use that same term, I guess. I don't know.
So what are we going to be seeing? I mean, I know what a bar looks like. Go up and down Central Avenue, we see bars.
We have a few bars up and down Central, yes.
So what are we going to be seeing? Have you seen it already, Senator? Storefronts?
Oh, yeah, I've seen not just here, but in Santa Fe and in Espanola, where we travel routinely. I've seen businesses with signs, saying cannabis, whatever. They have very colorful names. But opening soon. And
okay.
So I think we will see some. The city can regulate. Every city in the state has its own regulations on this, the zoning ordinances, and I know that there's been some dispute here in Albuquerque. A lot of the people who invested in a state license still don't have city approval to locate, and they're having to find some other locations. So,
limiting. What are some examples limiting? Maybe if you recall,
can't be near a school or a church. Can't be within. I think the city says 1,000 feet of another dispensary, spread them out a little bit so you don't have an over-concentration in one area.
So we're going to see these storefronts selling legally. Just doing research, maybe it's changed. A gram, I'm not even sure how big a gram is $9.25 to $11.61.
That was the medical, and that'll probably go up somewhat, I think. We don't tax medical. We've taken the tax off, and that'll continue. So, but there's a 24% tax on recreational.
Okay.
When you factor in all the gross receipts tax.
Okay, 20, almost a quarter of the money goes back to the state coffers of selling all this.
Well, the local community and the county get a cut of it too.
The city, I guess, can prohibit some business hours and things and locations.
Yeah, they can regulate the operation.
The operation of it. What are you envisioning? It to be like a bar? I mean, I understand the public cannot use it in a public arena. Like, a person can't walk down the street, I guess, and drink a beer. I don't know if they can go to a park. Can they go to a park and drink a beer? Then can they go to the park and have cannabis?
No, I mean, I think it's set up so that it's really for consumption in your own home or in a separately licensed. There's separate licensed places. I forget what they're called, but it's basically a place where you can consume it on site. So it'd be like a lounge.
Okay.
Or a place. And some of the dispensaries may have lounges attached to them, where if you buy cannabis in the store, you can then go next door to the lounge area.
Are we ever envisioning, I mean, people go to bars, I understand, to relax with friends. They have a glass of wine, a beer, a drink. Do we ever envision, and some people, their choice may not be alcohol, it may be cannabis. So are we ever envisioning that a bar will where friends get together, they don't want to drink a beer, but they would like to have marijuana?
Well, the way we set it up and now, you can't have a bar as a place where marijuana would be consumed. It has to be a separate marijuana consumption facility. And that's something we could revisit in the future. I don't know what other states' experience has been with that. We just took a look at it and said, let's not confuse things between, alcohol and cannabis. So.
Well, that's from the government standpoint, don't confuse things, but you can maybe imagine from the public standpoint, their choice might be to be with friends who want to drink a beer, but they don't want the beer.
Yeah.
So what about the public wanting to be with their friends having cannabis or marijuana rather than a beer?
Yeah, I'm sure that's an argument that's going to be put forward. And we can always say, well, you're welcome to do it at home. Invite your friends over. You can serve them some wine and you have your cannabis. I think a lot of the cannabis that's going to be consumed won't necessarily be smoked. I think it's going to be in the form of edibles and drinkables. They've gotten very creative. I understand in the states that have legalized cannabis, there's a lot of drinks and a lot that are infused with cannabis, or they have different ways of taking it besides smoking it. It doesn't have to be smoked necessarily. Clearly brownies and candies and things like that, but also other things like tinctures that you just squeeze into your underneath your tongue or something like that are absorbed rapidly and that can have a relaxing effect for you right away.
Are we concerned at all about the safety issue as with, alcohol? The bars close, I don't even know what hours they close, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, and are people imbibed getting out and driving and getting in their cars?
Well, the driving is an issue. I mean, that's absolutely an issue because one of the things we put money into this year was training police in the recognition of impairment due to cannabis consumption, so that they would have. Unfortunately, you can't just do a blood alcohol test the way you do with alcohol, with the DWI charge. Driving while under the influence of alcohol. But if you're driving under the influence of cannabis, it's harder to detect the influence of cannabis. You could still say they're driving in a crazy, erratic fashion. One of the things that people say is that alcohol makes you more aggressive and assertive. Cannabis tends to make you calmer, quieter. Which you may have a lot of people going 30 miles an hour in 45-mile-an-hour zones rather than 60 miles an hour in 45-mile-an-hour zones. So you won't have necessarily the same, but it can still impair your reaction time and your attention. Your attention may be less focused on the task of driving. And so we need to be able to recognize impairment due to cannabis, and that's what the training for the police are going through is intended to produce.
And some of the money from the sales, this 24% tax increase, is going towards training. What else? Health issues?
Well, most of it's, the way we've set it up now, the local community can spend their share on whatever they choose to spend it on, but the state share is going right into the general fund. And there's been a lot of talk about that too. Maybe we should earmark it for some specific things, treatment programs or additional police patrols or whatever. There have been a lot of education about the dangers of cannabis.
So there isn't any earmarking
pregnant
at this
women
point?
and things like. At this point, we didn't earmark any. you know.
Okay.
But the pediatricians say we should earmark some for education of pregnant women or of new parents. School teachers say you should earmark it for the dangers, to keep it out of the hands of kids. Police say you should earmark it for extra patrols. Everybody has their idea. Treatment people really want more treatment money.
The problems of other states, of course, Colorado, I think, was the first to legalize it, one of the first, at least to sell it legally. Anything that, in the minute we have left, Senator Ortiz, Pino, anything that we've learned from other states that can help us here?
Well, yeah, I think, we took a look at what other states' experience had been when we put together the bill. And I know that the person that's been hired came from Colorado. That was hired to run that division, the Cannabis Control Division within regulation and licensing. So she's experienced and she ran the Colorado program for a while. So we should be able to benefit from the experience other states have had. Hopefully we can avoid some of their problems and build on some of their successes.
Very good. Well, thank you for being a part of the program to update us. Still, as I see reportedly, the federal government says it's illegal. FBI says marijuana is illegal by federal laws, regardless if it's state decriminalized. Marijuana-related incidences are investigated by the FBI as resources allow, and the DEA, Drug Enforcement, also says they're focusing efforts on criminal organizations, not the individuals, but that people in possession of a controlled substance or marketing it could face federal prosecution, and specifically transporting it across state lines puts people at risk.
Right.
So
I think that's the case. It would be hard to believe, for me to believe that it's small amounts for personal use. If you have, you go to Colorado and you come back with some gummies, you're not going to get busted by the FBI. But if you're hauling a truckload of marijuana across state lines, you probably will. Yeah.
Senator Ortiz Pino, thank you again for all you do for the state of New Mexico and for being a part of our program here.
Well, thank you. I always enjoy these conversations, Diane.
That was good. I'm Diane Kinderwater. Thanks for watching and make it a great week with your family. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
In the Army National Guard, family means everything.
Our parents, they were really supportive that all 5 of us would join. I got my education because of the Guard. I got to travel a little bit and experience a whole different culture. It helped me get my job, it helped me pay for my house. Being part-time really helped because I could have some opportunities that were still in education.
Serving part-time in the Army National Guard instills pride that you and your family will share. Visit NationalGuard.com to learn more about part-time service.
Issues and Answers with your host Diane Kinderwater is presented as a public service to inform, educate, and better the lives of New Mexicans. To comment on today's program or to purchase a copy of any Issues and Answers program, visit sunbroadcasting.org or call us at 505-345-1991.